They always think revenge comes with shouting, with flames, broken glass, and shattered hearts. But the truth? It's much quieter than that. Sometimes revenge is a letter, written in careful handwriting, sealed with calm hands, and left in a drawer, waiting for the right day to speak. The day came. And as they sat in that lawyer's office, their faces pale, their voices trembling, my words found them at last. Not words of anger. Not even hate. Just truth, the kind that weighs heavier than gold and burns slower than fire. My son thought money could fix everything, that love could be bought, replaced, rewritten. He forgot who taught him those words. He forgot the woman who built his world, one meal, one sacrifice, one sleepless night at a time. Now he knows. Because what he inherited wasn't my wealth, it was the silence I left behind. The emptiness that mirrors how he made me feel. Every wall in that house will remind him of me, not through photographs or possessions, but through absence. And me? I left this world quietly. No anger. No pain. No unfinished business. Only peace. Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. It's letting the truth speak when you no longer have to. And as the wind moves through the old house, touching the curtains, whispering through the halls, I like to think it carries my boy still. Soft, steady, and unbroken. Remember me, not for how I left, but for what I left behind. The word useless echoed through the quiet house like a slap. He didn't shout it, that would have hurt less. He said it with disappointment, like a truth he'd just realized. My son stood by the window, his voice calm, his eyes cold. I remember the dust dancing in the sunlight, the ticking clock between us. He said I was too old to make decisions, too tired to manage the house, too fragile to live alone. I said nothing. Just smiled faintly, that kind of smile that hides a storm. But inside, something cracked. And I knew he'd forgotten who raised him. That night, I sat at the dining table long after the lights went out. His words still lingered in the air like smoke. The old photos on the wall seemed to watch me, his childhood smile, his first bike, his graduation. Every frame whispered a question, when did love turn into pity? I traced my fingers over the wood grain of the table, the same table I'd polished for 40 years. The silence felt heavier than grief. And that's when the thought began, quiet, patient, and dangerous. Maybe it was time to teach him what useless really meant. The next morning, I brewed tea as usual. He passed by, barely looking at me, already on his phone, business calls, investments, life. I watched him go, the sound of the door closing behind him. The same door I once waited by when he was a boy coming home from school. I sipped the tea, bitter and cold. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt ready. The lawyer's office smelled of dust, leather, and old secrets. Rain streaked down the window behind the desk, blurring the city outside into watercolor shadows. Mr. Harlan looked up as she entered, his gray hair neat, his tie slightly crooked. He hadn't seen her in years, not since her husband's will. Mrs. Whitmore, he greeted softly. What brings you here? Her gloved hand rested on the back of the chair. It's time I update my will, she said, voice calm, almost weightless. He hesitated, studying her expression, dignified, unreadable. Are you sure? He asked quietly. She smiled faintly. Quite. The clock ticked between them, a patient observer to something that felt irreversible. For hours, they drafted, erased, and rewrote. Every clause felt like a confession, every word a blade carefully turned. Outside, thunder rolled softly, as if the world itself was listening. The house, she said, tapping her pen gently, must remain untouched, until he learns what love costs. Mr. Harlan looked up, uncertain. You mean to? Yes, she interrupted. He'll understand, in time. Her eyes didn't waver. They gleamed faintly in the lamplight, not cruel, but resolute. When the papers were finally signed, her hand didn't tremble once. Mr. Harlan sighed. He won't like this. Her lips curved slightly. Then perhaps he'll finally feel something real. She stepped out into the street, rain drumming on the cobblestones, a muted orchestra of freedom. In the window's reflection, she saw herself, silver hair pinned neatly, pearls at her throat, a calmness she hadn't known in years. The city lights shimmered across the wet pavement, breaking into fractured halos. Each reflection felt like a version of her, the mother, the widow, the forgotten woman, and now, the quiet avenger. For the first time, her chest felt light. She whispered into the night, "It's begun." A car passed, splashing water over the curb, but she didn't flinch. Not anymore. Days stretched into weeks. He moved through the house like a stranger, footsteps echoing through long, hollow corridors. The sound of his laughter came only through his phone, filtered, distant. Never for her. At dinner, the chair across from her remained empty. She placed 2 plates out of habit, one untouched, one half-eaten. Even the ticking clock seemed slower, as the morning something unseen. She caught her reflection in the polished silverware, alone, dignified, fading. Yet deep in her chest, a quiet fire began to flicker. Not anger. Resolve. One evening, she wrote a note in her elegant script, "Dinner's ready." She placed it on the counter, next to his favorite dish, now cold. When he came home, he didn't even glance at it. He brushed past, smelling faintly of cologne and impatience. From her chair by the window, she heard his door slam upstairs. Her chest tightened, but not from sadness anymore. It was from clarity. She whispered to herself, "He's still my boy, but I'm no longer his mother." Outside, a streetlight flickered, casting her shadow long across the room, stretched, fragile, and alone. That night, she opened an old box, yellowed letters, faded photographs. Him as a child, his first steps, the smile that once reached his eyes. Each memory glowed faintly in the lamplight before dimming again. Her hands trembled as she touched the photo of him holding her hand at graduation. "What happened to us?" she whispered. The silence answered for him. And in that silence, she understood. It wasn't hate that had replaced love, it was pride. She asked him to gather the family for dinner, his wife, her niece, Mr. Harlan. He frowned. "For what?" "You're fine." She smiled faintly. "Just one evening together." He sighed, checking his watch. "Fine. But make it quick." That night, she set the table herself, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, a centerpiece of white lilies. The chandelier cast warm light, but beneath it, the air felt tight, too still, too expectant. The walls seemed to listen. As they ate, conversation flowed, shallow, practiced, polite. She watched her son carefully, how he spoke over his wife, how he smiled only when others looked. When dessert came, she placed her spoon down deliberately. "There's something I must say," she began. The room went quiet, forks frozen midair, eyes turning toward her. "I've rewritten my will," she said calmly. The words floated in the air like smoke, soft but suffocating. She met his eyes, unblinking. "Because love shouldn't be measured in inheritance." He laughed once, short, bitter. "You're being dramatic, Mother." "Maybe," she said softly, "but so is neglect." The chandelier above flickered as thunder rolled outside. She stood, gathering the plates, her voice steady. "You'll understand one day. Perhaps not soon. But you will." And as she walked away, his knife clinked against the plate, sharp, metallic, final. The next morning, he searched through drawers, files, safes, desperation hidden under the guise of order. He called the lawyer, pretending concern. "Just checking on Mother's estate," he lied. Mr. Harlan's calm voice betrayed nothing. "Everything is in order." For the first time, panic flashed across his face. His control, slipping. He poured himself a drink before noon. His hand shook as he lifted the glass. Upstairs, she listened to his footsteps, heavy, frantic, and smiled faintly. He burst into her room, holding a crumpled document. "You changed everything," he hissed. You're giving it all away. She looked up slowly from her book. I'm giving it back. Back to who? He snapped. Strangers? People who don't deserve it. She closed the book gently, met his furious eyes. People who never made me feel unwanted. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then he turned and slammed the door, the echo rattling through the house like thunder trapped inside. She sat in the quiet that followed, the scent of dust and faint smoke from the fireplace surrounding her. For a fleeting second, guilt brushed against her chest. Then it passed like a shadow. Through the window, she watched the wind bend the trees, their branches trembling under the storm. I taught him strength, she whispered, but never humility. Lightning split the sky. Somewhere deep inside her, a strange peace took root. The house was dark except for the soft flicker of the fireplace. She sat in her armchair, the glow painting her face in golden shadow. A photograph of her husband sat on the mantel, watching over her like a ghost of old promises. Would you have stopped me? She whispered. The fire crackled, a soft no. She smiled sadly. I didn't think so. The clock struck midnight. Outside, rain began again, steady, cleansing, final. She unfolded fine stationery, dipped her pen in ink. Each stroke carried the weight of years unspoken. You called me useless. Let this will prove otherwise. Her hand paused. A tear rolled down her cheek, falling onto the ink. She let it stain, it made the truth more human. When she finished, she sealed the envelope with careful precision. Her breath trembled once, then steadied. The letter glowed faintly in the firelight, like a secret waiting to be born. She placed the letter on the nightstand, beside her wedding ring. The fire dimmed embers. Outside, the rain softened into a hush. She lay down, her face serene, eyes reflecting the flicker of flame one last time. A soft sigh left her lips, not of sadness, but release. And as the house settled around her, the wind carried a whisper through the open window. It sounded almost like thank you. Black coats. Gray skies. The scent of lilies thick in the air. The church bells tolled slowly, their sound deep and hollow. Her son stood beside the casket, his jaw clenched, eyes dry. He didn't speak. Didn't move. But his hands trembled. The murmurs around him were soft and rehearsed. She was such a strong woman, someone whispered. He nodded mechanically, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The ceremony dragged like a cold wind. He stared at her photograph, the faint smile, the pearls. For a moment, he saw her eyes in the picture as if they were still alive, still watching. Mr. Harlan approached quietly, a black folder in hand. He bowed his head. Tomorrow, he said softly, we read her will. His son swallowed hard, nodding once. The sound of rain against the stained glass window filled the silence between them, like an echo of unfinished words. When the service ended, the guests left in whispers. Her son lingered, staring at the coffin one last time. He whispered under his breath, you didn't have to do this. But the silence that answered was not forgiveness, it was finality. As he walked out into the rain, the wind caught his coat like a wave pulling him under. And somewhere inside him, the first crack of regret began to show. The next morning, the lawyer's office was heavy with perfume and nerves. Her son sat in front, his wife beside him, arms crossed tightly. The air hummed with tension, even the clock seemed hesitant to tick. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. Let's begin. At first, it was ordinary, small gifts, donations, quiet acknowledgments. Then his voice shifted, slower, deliberate. To my son, he read, who once called me useless. The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone froze. I leave not what he expected, but what he earned. Gasps rippled across the room. Her son's face went pale, his throat tightening. Mr. Harlan continued, charities, scholarships, donations made in her name. Her fortune scattered like seeds into places that would remember kindness, not bloodline. Finally, he paused. And the house? He adjusted his glasses. To whoever remembers love before pride. Her son's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The truth had already spoken. The silence was unbearable. His wife shifted uncomfortably. He rose abruptly, knocking the chair back. "This is insane," he barked. Mr. Harlan didn't flinch. This was her choice. For a long moment, he stood there, breathing hard, eyes glassy. Then he turned and walked out without a word. The door closed softly behind him, but the echo of her voice seemed to linger in the room. "Now you understand." Years passed. The house aged gracefully, ivy climbing its stone walls. Inside, dust caught the sunlight like golden snow. It was no longer a place of sorrow, but of memory. Children laughed outside, chasing each other through the garden she once tended. To them, it was just an old house. But the walls still whispered her story, quietly, faithfully. Part 2, The Living Memory. Her name appeared on scholarships, hospitals, and small libraries. Each plaque read, "In honor of Eleanor Whitmore, who believed love should never be forgotten." Her son lived modestly now, no mansions, no noise. He visited the house once a year, leaving lilies on the porch. When he stood there, he could almost hear her voice, soft, forgiving. He whispered, "I finally understand." Part 3, The Whisper That Stayed. As the evening sun poured through the cracked windows, the air shimmered with warmth. The curtain swayed gently, dust glinting like tiny stars. It felt as though she was still there, calm, watching, proud. And if one listened closely, just beneath the hum of the wind, you could almost hear her say, "Love never dies. It just waits to be remembered." One evening, he found it, tucked neatly inside a drawer. The paper was yellowed slightly, her handwriting elegant and unhurried. He sat down, heart pounding. As he read, the words blurred through his tears. She had remembered everything, his laughter, his cruelty, his promise as a child. And still, she had loved him. Just not blindly anymore. When he reached the end, he pressed the letter to his chest and whispered, "I'm sorry." He couldn't stay there anymore. The walls had become mirrors, showing him everything he had lost. He left quietly, no sale, no announcement. Neighbors said they'd see him sometimes, walking at dusk, silent. His eyes softer, his shoulders lower. People called it grief. But deep down, he knew it was transformation. Legacy Part 1, The House Remains. Years passed. The house aged gracefully, ivy climbing its stone walls. Inside, dust caught the sunlight like golden snow. It was no longer a place of sorrow, but of memory. Children laughed outside, chasing each other through the garden she once tended. To them, it was just an old house. But the walls still whispered her story, quietly, faithfully. They say words can't kill, but some leave scars that never heal. He was my only son. My pride. My reason for everything I did. And yet, one evening, he looked me in the eyes and called me useless. The word echoed through the walls of the home I built for him. I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally understood. You can give someone your whole life, and still be seen as nothing. But I wasn't done yet. There are lessons only time can teach, and truth has a way of finding its moment. When the lawyer arrived that morning, my son still laughed. He didn't know that the paper in that briefcase would end his laughter for good. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Old Folks channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel.